Hello and welcome to another edition of our Well-Balanced podcast. My name is Ezra Firkins. I'm here with Charlie Gruys, Vector Wealth Management and Advisor. Charlie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Ezra. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today I want to run through some scenarios as we have in the past. I just love kind of bouncing ideas off of you and saying, like, does this work? So I'm going to spend a little time just sort of laying out this kind of scenario and checking with our resident expert advisor here to see, does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Sounds like fun.
Cool.
I'm definitely up for it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I think maybe where this question came from is, so I'm around 45 years old. I'm a middle-aged guy, right? Yeah. And I thought, well, what multiple of income should I have saved up for retirement? And it kind of got me thinking. I did some research and, tried to lay this out. And I thought, well, all right, so typically our clients at Vector are probably heading into retirement. They're pre-retirement, they're in retirement. So that puts most people at maybe 55, 10 years older than me, give or take.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got, clients that are 65, 75, 85 too, right? So that's all.
Absolutely.
They're all in this here. But this one here, I want to kind of focus on the sort of income multiple when preparing. Like, what is your savings goals for your retirement?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Great topic. I love it.
All right. So the research suggests, and this isn't a hard and fast, it's probably suggestion or maybe rule of thumb.
Yeah.
But the research suggests at 45, you want to have around 3 or 4 times your income. So just simple math here. If you have, say, $100,000 a year that you're making, you'd want to have $400,000 saved up in the bank. If you're a household, you've got both individuals making $100,000, that's $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
You'd want to have $600,000 to $800,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
Some assumptions here is that you're going to save, for that next 20 years as a 45-year-old, or if you're going to save about 15% of your income. So that's continuing to go in. You're continuing to earn some return on your investments that you've got in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking to those kind of 50-ish, they say 6 times your income. If you're 60, 8 times your income. And then if you're kind of 65, 70, you're shooting for 10x your income.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the premise. That as you're approaching that retirement age, that multiple of what you've saved or what you've earned,
mm-hmm.
That number is kind of going up so that you can have a nice runway, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a financial advisor, investment professional, I would like to say that hopefully it's not just sitting in the bank. It's invested appropriately. That's very important. And then the right type of account. So oftentimes a retirement account, whether that's an IRA or a 401k.
Yeah.
Ideally, that's kind of location we'd like to see those.
Yeah. So tax advantaged accounts.
Absolutely.
Be it a Roth or a 401k or an IRA.
Yeah.
Right.
So savings good. Savings important.
Right.
We also want to make sure we're using the right types of accounts and have those assets in the right location.
Right, because a savings account at your bank isn't going to earn too much. Well, maybe what is a savings rate?
You might be able to get, depending on the bank, 3, 4-ish
right.
percent, and that's not even in a CD. CD might be a little bit percent more than that.
Yeah,
but some sort of like a savings money market might be in that 3 range.
Yeah, and those numbers vary as do all returns. And and we should also note this is all sort of napkin math. We're just trying to have round numbers to get an idea.
Sure, that works.
Okay, so good point on actually invested, not just dollars in the bank saved. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's run this through. So let's say that you're a household and you've got, I'm looking off some notes here.
Yeah.
So you've got $250,000 a year that your household makes. So, maybe she's making 150 and he's making 100, it adds up to 250, however that goes. Households earning about 250.
Sure.
So at retirement, you'd want that goal to be 2.5 million in investable assets, sort of liquid plus or minus. And I guess I'm not counting the house either.
Sure.
This is outside of the house because you live in a house and all those things.
ultimately, very often, people are looking to replace their income in retirement. And that's where you're thinking of this $2.5 million mark in this example.
Right.
And oftentimes people don't want to rely on the equity value of their home for their retirement income needs. So I think that's
exclude that.
Perfectly reasonable to exclude that for our purposes today.
So let's run through 2 examples here. So both examples, you're 55, you're 10 years away from retirement. Your savings goal is $2.5 million because you earn about $250K a year. And, maybe that goes up or down over the next 10 years. But again, just looking at averages here.
Sure.
So let's say that you've not only, but if you've got $500K, $500,000 in investable assets, what do you have to do to get to that goal? And basically, there's investing, which we're going to look at, let's say, a couple of the range. Maybe it's 12% or 8% or 4% of annual returns on that nest egg.
Yeah.
What do you have to put in out of your sort of income, out of your paycheck to get to that 2.5? And I guess my point here is that if you're earning 12%, you might need to only put in $4,500 a month only. And if you're, let's see, that's about right. If you're earning 12% on your investments, that's a high hurdle rate.
Yeah.
That is
unlikely.
That's
a high savings rate.
Yeah.
I think is what you're trying to say is that you're making $250,000 as a household to get to that $2.5 million in a savings rate, assuming a 12% return, which is a pretty high hurdle.
Yeah.
You still need to save $4,500 a month to get to that $2.5 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if your returns aren't as good, like 4%, you pretty much have to double that. You're really having to be very aggressive in your savings. If you're starting from having that $500K in the bank and you're still trying to catch up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So example 2, you've got $1 million in investable assets at 55 years old. So now you might only need to save maybe $2,000 a month to kind of hit that mark. And that's that's still at an 8% return.
Yeah.
Which again is, we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
Why that number may or may not be appropriate for everyone. And I think the number is suggested that a person should save around 15% of their income. So if it's it's 100,000 would be 15,000 saved, 200,000 would be 30,000. So for this couple who's earning that 250,000 a year, 24,000 to put in a year is about on track, actually.
Yeah.
So that's a sweet spot to be. If you've got $1 million in the bank, you've got a goal of $2.5 million in 10 years, and you're stacking around $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
You're on track towards your goal.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll just make a note of too, it's, we're talking about contributions. So part of it is your contributions out of your paycheck that are getting saved towards this goal. But oftentimes individuals as employees, their employer is putting in a match or a profit sharing or some sort of contribution. And you mentioned that nice target kind of 15% range. That's an often cited good rule of thumb to shoot for. And those employer contributions, you can certainly include that as part of the calculus to get to that savings rate.
Right. Another one.
Not just saying your contributions only. It's a combination of the two.
And the other one would be like if you had a pension, right? Or if you maybe real estate that produce some income for you that, after you pay the mortgage, so on.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Other sources of income are an important piece of the pie. So
we've got kind of a saying around Vector that, everyone's plan works at 8% returns. We've said those words before. And so that's maybe optimistic. Talk about why that might be an optimistic number, that the returns on your invested assets are 8%.
Yeah, when I think of 8%, it's certainly looking at historical rates of return and especially what we've seen over the last number of years combined, an 8% average annualized return, that's pretty reasonable, but you have to have a pretty high allocation to equities to have experienced that 8%. So that's part of it too, is that it's going to take a decent allocation to equities to have that 8% as realistic.
Oh, yeah, annualized over 10 years. And that's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah, the other part is like 8% average annualized.
Every year,
single year, year after year. Well, anyone that's been around the last number of years, or, if we're talking about 55 or a 45-year-old, they've experienced years where the markets have been not
negative.
Negative.
Yeah, for
negative 10, negative 15. Think back to 2008, negative 35%. But let's backtrack just more recently. Well, 2024, we're looking at, what was it, mid-20s?
And the S&P equity.
500.
So straight equity,
so this,
just broadly.
Yeah, right. For estimates, 8% average, it's okay. It's a reasonable number. But the reality is you're not going to get 8% year in, year out consistently. It's just not how the markets work.
And then we should talk a little bit about, as you're approaching retirement, your risk appetite maybe changes.
Yeah, absolutely. The other piece of the puzzle is that they've never had more assets saved before in their lives. But if we look at the dollar amount relative to how much the decline we, let's say we experienced a couple months ago, well, that dollar amount or that percentage, in the grand scheme of things, the percentage decline isn't nearly as worrisome,
right?
Because of the dollar amount.
So you're saying that when a person is about to retire, they probably have the most saved, maybe, that they ever have.
Right.
And so to see those dollars fluctuate around on
let's say it goes down 5%, 10%. You got. Let's use $2 million as a nice round number. It goes down 10%, $200,000. Like, wow, I just lost like $200,000 because of a 10% decline.
Right. And that's hard to sleep at night.
It's hard.
You're maybe pulling down that portfolio screen and checking the number again when you wake up, right? You're maybe losing sleep over something like that. So we've talked about that 8% is maybe a reasonable number at a younger age. As you get a little bit older, you want to probably have some more diversity and more certainty. I'm using air quotes here just because nothing's exactly certain in the markets, but you can invest in lower volatility assets, right?
Yeah, and have higher confidence.
So 10x your income at retirement is maybe a reasonable goal. There's probably a lot of considerations that go into that. Like 10x is not everybody's number, right? What are the things that are kind of stand out to you for how that, if it's 10x, 12x, 5x, how do you arrive? Is that a reasonable number? Maybe is 10x, is that reasonable?
Yeah. There's a lot of assumptions that are built into that 10x. Yeah. So the 10x at retirement, that's kind of somebody that's age 65, 67. That's also trying to say, well, have a kind of a longevity. Like, how long do you anticipate? Do you have, thinking of your family or your personal medical history, do you anticipate longevity?
Right.
Do you anticipate maybe potentially living to 90, 95, 96, or maybe due to personal medical history, family medical history, that just might not be realistic.
Yeah.
And so therefore that your age alone at retirement, maybe that's 65 or 67, but your longevity potential plays into that as well. Yeah. And not just for yourself, for your partner or your spouse.
Right. Yeah, the household. Yeah, your family. Yeah. Right. Good point.
The other piece that age factors into this too is this is kind of the average normal retirement age of 65 or 67. Well, we all know some people want to be done sooner. So if you want to be done sooner, let's say at 60, maybe you do need, because of your longevity, you might be living to 95, 96, or you or your partner would be. Yeah. Well, then to have a nice buffer, a cushion for the uncertainties that the next 30 years,
Yeah.
35 years of your life, you need to have more saved up
Right.
to be able to replace your income once you're done working.
Mm-hmm.
So age, I think, in two ways: longevity, but also, are you trying to be done working sooner? Or, you know what? There's always that person that they hang around until they're 70 or 75, or we all know those individuals that are like, yeah, I'm not retiring.
Yeah.
I might slow down. I might
Yeah.
do less.
Yeah. Pick and
But
choose the jobs.
I may not. Yeah.
Certainly do know those people.
They're going to probably work until they can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's the age factor.
Mm-hmm.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
So in your hypothetical example, we were talking about a couple or a household having income of $250,000, and they want to have a similar lifestyle in retirement, or early in retirement that was similar to their lifestyle of those years prior to retirement. This rule of thumb definitely works. I mean, that's who it's geared for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about like what are the things people are spending money on, and maybe they've paid off their house, but maybe there's still some mortgage payments.
Yeah, maybe you got 5-10 years left of mortgage payments.
Right. You're at 55, 65, there may still be a 30-year mortgage out there, which it's all fine. Certainly, a car, going out to eat, traveling,
Maybe
saving.
there's bucket list travel in the first few years.
Yep.
Let's get it while we can, while we're able.
Yeah.
While we're healthy, joints are still feeling good.
We're gonna get out on that pickleball court.
Yeah, get out on that. So maybe grandma and grandpa want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
The young grandma and grandpa.
Right.
So
the hip, cool ones.
The hip, cool ones. That's where the lifestyle comes in. Whether it's travel, maybe you want to travel extensively in those first few years.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, you know what, we're just going to hang and play golf at our own course, and the relative expenses are really low.
Right.
Okay.
I've heard it that it's 80% of pre-retirement income. That's sort of a rule of thumb. So if what you spent when you're working, maybe you spend a little less. To your point, those early years of travel and family, maybe it's closer to the what you were spending in your working years.
Yeah.
But in theory, maybe it goes down as I think debt was another one on our consideration list.
Yeah.
As we pay off debts and such.
Yeah. Maybe the car payments are rolling off in the next couple of years. Maybe the mortgage has got 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years left. Or let's say a boat. We're in Minnesota.
That's
we're coming into lake season in summer. Maybe it's a boat payment. You got a couple more years on that. So everyone's lifestyle, debt, age is unique and individual to them.
Yeah. Right.
And then ultimately that's our goal, is to tailor things to their individual needs.
Let's do a little bit of a speed round here.
Yeah. Love it. Let's do it.
So some of these we may be, we'll just touch on them here. So these are kind of categorized as about the goal itself, right? So it's 2.5 million. Is that enough? Is that a reasonable goal? Do we see that across sort of the types of clients that we serve?
Yeah, how I like to sum that up is, what are you asking for from that 2.5 million?
Right. Next question is inflation. So people ask about inflation. Will in 20 years or 10 years, depending on how you kind of look at it, will that 2.5 million still be? How far will it go? How do we calculate that? How do we know that?
Inflation is unique to each person. So we can make a general inflation assumption, call it 3%. Yeah, recently it's been higher than that on average, but there's also periods of times where it's been certainly lower than 3%. Our kind of usual baseline is about 3%. And then for individuals like travel, we could say, hey, this travel budget, let's use a different inflation number that's more personal and unique to them. Maybe there's, for medical, for example, we could use a different inflation assumption for their medical expenses. Then it could be unique and tailored to them and their circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point. Right. Yeah. Flat screen TVs maybe are getting cheaper, but your medical expenses might be getting more expensive.
Yeah, so absolutely.
That's good to have kind of different assumptions that you can plug in there.
Absolutely.
I think we talked about that kind of if I live to 95 or 100. Maybe talk a little bit about that beneficiary balance. So the ideal is that you have funds that last through your life, which also means that there's probably a buffer.
Yeah, I would say for a beneficiary balance, for most households, it is a goal and a desire to have assets that they do leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique and different for everybody is maybe what that number is for them or range that they want to have. There are certainly some people that say, hey, I want my last check. I want that one to probably bounce if I could.
Yeah.
No, we can't time it that way. But each person, individual, has kind of a threshold that they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can show and model things
Mm-hmm.
so that they can see where they are. For us, the way we do our planning and our investment policies, it's specific and unique to the client and their situation and when are they anticipating needing income from the portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And their portfolio is designed for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so you're building it out and trying to match all of those different factors. And then I'm sure taxes,
inflation.
Yeah. Well, good. Any last thoughts on this retirement savings goals, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah. At the end of the day, there are great rules of thumb. So some of the rules of thumb that we've talked about today is a savings goal, how much to save. So 15% of your income, yes, that's a reasonable goal. Now, does that need to be higher or lower for you as an individual? Well, that's what an advisor can help with.
Right.
How much should you have saved by a certain age? Well, yeah, there's certain rules of thumb. 10x is certainly reasonable with normal assumptions. But individuals and households, well, that number is unique and personal to them.
Yeah, based on age, lifestyle, debt, other income streams.
Absolutely.
Their expected inflation, which is personal, not just CPI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's wrap it up there, Charlie. It's been a great discussion. Thanks for coming in and talking retirement savings goals with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Ezra. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to come in here and chat with you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment